Hey everybody, welcome back to another Journey on the Fly, the podcast. I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas and a happy new year. I hope this year turns out to be one of the best years ever. And I'm not going to get into all the details of what I mean by that, except to say, whether it's good times or it's bad times, be grateful. And it's okay to do hard things. It just is. So we had started a discussion on wonder and awe and what that has to do with fly fishing. Now, we're going to take that one further step. This is a 3 or maybe even a 4-part that I'm working on here because I think this is such an incredibly valuable, important subject, and it just coincides with fly fishing or anything outdoors for that matter so much that I can't pass it up. Well, friends, without further ado, it's 2026. This is the first podcast of the year. Let's get into it. Hey, here we are, back again. Excited to be behind the microphone. I don't know if I like the sound of my voice or I just like giving people information and knowledge. Whatever the case is, here we are. And I'm going to continue talking about wonder and awe and the benefits that it promotes mentally, physically, and spiritually. But I'm going to take it one step further. I did this talk for Trout Unlimited a few months back and got some really great feedback because it's different. Now, that's not the reason that I'm doing it. The reason that I'm doing this talk is because I've invested deeply into the research on this particular subject, because wonder and awe is something that, unless you have psychopathic tendencies, and I mean that literally, I'm not joking there, you're not going to experience these kinds of things if you have those kinds of tendencies. And I'm not bashing somebody if they're in that situation. I'm just saying that we have an opportunity to willfully recognize wonder and awe in these experiences. And there are those of us that already do, that appreciate them. And I'm looking at now the data, both physically, mentally, philosophically, and eventually building an argument here theologically as to why fly fishing, among other things, brings us to these wonderful places to give us these incredible experiences and what that means for us. So in all of this, I have a very modest couple of things that I'm trying to accomplish here. Really, the very first thing is to expose everybody within my listening range to the benefits of wonder and awe. Secondly, it is to promote the idea that we should find places where it is silent and still that we can wonder. We need to create in life a consistent time to go to this place as often as we can and take people with us. And at the very least, there should be a rhythmic practice, a part of the things that we do for our brain, for our soul, for our body, and for the people that we love. Wonder is a tremendous thing. We've actually looked at a couple definitions of wonder, which I will just read one to get us started because I think it's really important. I love Dr. Ross Inman's description of the fact that wonder truly is a thing that humans experience. He says, wonder is a distinctly human response to reality, one marked by a deep sense of astonishment, admiration, and awe. He continues and he says, when we are gripped by wonder, we are startled out of the ordinary and humdrum of human experience. When rightly ordered, wonder can indicate to us that we are in the presence of something truly excellent and worthy of our sustained attention. there's a lot of wonderful things to discuss. And we talked a little bit about some of the physical aspects where stress is reduced, anxiety is reduced. They've even found correlation with the drop in blood pressure and thereby the drop of heart disease, because people shift their lives. They build a rhythm in their lives to experience these wonderful things. Now, according to the Harvard Business Review and an article titled "Why You Need to Protect Your Sense of Wonder, Especially Now," by David Fessel and Karen Rivich, they said the quieting of the mental chatter decreases rumination and fosters clarity and calm. So when our frontal cortex and when our default modes are calmed, when they are put in a place where you're not just ruminating. And sometimes when I hear that word, I guess, I picture two things. I picture a teenager in math class just staring off into space. But I also kind of picture the more comical thing where you've got a person just, drooling, not because they're in desire, but because they found themselves just bored out of their minds and they're just daydreaming so badly, spitting their tires in life, if you will. And that's what I picture when I think of the word rumination. You can also think of deer. Just kidding. It's a dad joke. But the good part about this understanding of what wonder does for us in our psyche is that it should drive us to experience or to put people and ourselves in these positions to experience these things more often. And here's the beautiful thing that I think we can all agree on, that wonder does capture us by surprise, even if we're pursuing it. Right? When I'm driving down the road every morning and I watch the sunrise, even though I know I'm heading into the city of Pittsburgh, and no offense to Pittsburgh city people, but I'm not a fan of most of the architecture there. It doesn't fill me with wonder like a sunrise does. But nevertheless, the point is still the same. I know that sun's coming up. It doesn't catch me by surprise in that respect. But what it does, the beauty and the difference from day to day to day, from moment to moment, captures me and just fills me with wonder and appreciation. Well, in the process of all this wonderful research, there is a book entitled The Science of Emotion. And there's a few other books that I'll reference here, and there's two really interesting things I want to talk about on this episode. That wonder and awe and the sublime, these experiences and these emotions that we experience in these different events, what they do to us. And it's incredibly just, it's wonderful, if I can use the redundancy of all this. It is a wonderful thing in and of itself. So the very first thing that we hear that is captured in all of this is this idea that they've coined. It's called perceived vastness. It's when we encounter something so large and beautiful or complex that it dwarfs our sense of self. Now, I want you to think about that for a minute, because there's studies that they've done where they've introduced a group of participants and students in these studies to, say, Fisherman's Wharf, and then also to some great mountain range out in California. And then they brought them back and they said, well, we want you to draw a picture of what that captured for you. And it's fascinating because the people that saw Fisherman's Wharf, which was not that big of a deal, but then saw Yosemite, the people that drew themselves in Yosemite were substantially, I think it was 30% smaller. They drew themselves in these pictures because of how the experience made them see themselves. And these researchers go on and they talk about how not only does it give us this perceived vastness, this encounter with something so large and so complex, whatever the situation may be, that it causes us ourselves to think less of ourselves. But it doesn't just do that. Here's the beautiful thing. They've concluded that not only does it humble you, but it actually turns your self-word or your inward looking outward to the world and opens you up to different views and perspectives on what's happening in reality. It causes a sense of community. This is all from saying, I'm just picking a sunrise, from being moved by a sunrise or being moved by the vastness of a snow-capped mountain or the beauty of a snake, for that matter, if that's something that you're into. I think copperheads are a beautiful snake. There's so many things. When you think of the cell, or you think of the eyeball, or you think of the human body and the brain, how it all works together. Relationships. Maybe it's a newborn. Maybe it's your children. In my case, even at 17, it still fills me with wonder and awe when I realize how blessed I am to be part of that person's life. This perceived vastness is a really powerful thing. It is something that, in the process of it all, draws us closer to the people around us, even moves us out of our own circles. Professor Dr. Kentler at Berkeley coined this phrase, the small self, to describe this phenomenon. And when we experience awe, whether before the Grand Canyon or a roaring river or the intricate design of the living cell, our sense of self-importance shrinks and our connection with the world expands. Dr. Inman puts it this way, and I love this. We, quote, decreases our sense of self-importance and makes us more open and responsive to the world around us. This is absolutely amazing. 33% is the actual number that when people drew self-portraits of those who visited Yosemite or those who visited Fisherman's Wharf, 33% smaller they drew themselves. So there's a psychological impact that takes place that is absolutely vital, I think, to humanity, for that matter. Small self. So how does this small self of wonder foster well-being? Well, here's a couple things to think about. It promotes collective engagement, right? No longer we are so focused on ourselves. And honestly, speaking from my own experience, not only am I now not so focused on my own just stuff I'm dealing with, I can now look outside of me. I can now engage with people that probably are in much more need and outside of my own person that I could maybe even help. 2, it encourages self-transcendent experiences. Now, I'm not talking about new thought. I'm not talking about manifestations. I'm not talking about things like this. This is a simple word phrase that they put together that helps us understand things. And what they mean by self-transcendent experiences is simply that it draws us out of ourselves and towards the world around us. That we can knowingly go, if we're finding ourselves so focused on our own lives and our own troubles, we can pick up a fly rod, we can head to the stream, whether we catch a fish or not, and we can see some of the most beautiful things and some of the most unique things in those moments that will literally change our lives, that will help us refocus from ourselves to those around us. And 3, it expands our mental models, right? Our mental modes and our mental models, for that matter. It stimulates new ways of thinking. Now, I love this because I've also been reading, one of the other books I've been reading on this subject is talking about beauty and art. And it's amazing because all you've got to do is think about a handful of artists or photographers or whatever the medium you can think of. How many people do landscapes? How many people use reality and make good art from nature, from the beauty that we see all around us? right? So it actually drives creativity. Wonder does. It's it's pretty amazing. Dr. Kettler reminds us that this curiosity that we're going to talk about here in a moment that comes from wonder, it drives discovery. Okay? Before I get too far, I need to address this other thing we're going to talk about. So we have this small self effect, right? This perceived vastness that creates this small self effect. Then we have, and I think that small self effect is growing on me, which I know sounds like an oxymoron, but in my appreciation of my studies and what I've been finding here is that I got caught up in this next one because of who I am and what I'm about. It just made so much sense to me. It really hit me good. There arises from experiences of wonder and the emotion of awe a need for accommodation. Let me back this up into a story from many years ago when I used to archery hunt. I would go out, and long before Sunday hunting was around, I would be in that tree stand for hours, sometimes 8, 10, 12 hours a day from the time before the sun come up until after, and then after it went down. And I would see so many things. I would see birds and herds of deer, and I would see coyotes. I would see turkeys and squirrels and so many things, trespassers. But I always had this odd guilt because I would say to my wife, I said, why is it? Or I, at the time, think to myself, why do I seem to feel so close to God when I'm out there and not anywhere else? It's where, as fly fishermen, we get this terrible, terrible, terrible saying that when I want to spend time with God, I go to church on the stream and all the other variations of that, which is simply a fundamental misunderstanding of what church is. But I get what we're all trying to say, that the sanctuary of being out in the beauty of that wonderful created order puts us in these places. And this idea that they've discovered, they've termed need for accommodation, and they define it as it's our mind's effort to adjust its understanding to make sense of what we're seeing. And to my knowledge, there's two paths that we can take. I like taking both. I don't think they contradict each other at all. You have one path that is more like a tool, meaning it's more mechanistic. That when I need to be accommodated, when my mind wants and it's almost entrapping me in this world of you need to make sense of this before you can move on. And it captures our entire being and thought. The tool side of this would be understanding, say, the northern lights with the gases dancing in our atmosphere and so on and so forth, making these incredible spectacles of flowing and changing and pulsing light that are just breathtaking, I hear. Never witnessed it myself. And so you can understand it that way, and it's really important. We'll actually get to that point about how these wonder drives discovery. But the other side of it, which is really important, the very important aspect of it comes down to this. It's what causes us to ask these big, deep questions about origin, meaning, purpose, life, being, existence. It's where, as we will discover on the next podcast, philosophy gets its juice from. So it's pretty fascinating because Professor Kettler and his group really dives down into this. And he actually goes on to say, Dr. Kettler, he says, Isaac Newton and Rene Descartes are both awestruck by rainbows. Well, they were. In wonder, they ask, how is that rainbow formed? When light refracts through water molecules. This wonder of rainbows led these two scholars to some of their best work on mathematics, on physics of light, color theory, sensation, and perception. Wonder drives discovery, but it also drives creativity. You know, some of the most beautiful novels have been written not so much isolation away from people, but isolation into nature. It's incredible and amazing what we experience through this small self effect and this need for accommodation. It creates this feeling of, let's put it this way. So 18th century German philosopher Immanuel Kant described this kind of experience as, quote, a feeling of displeasure arising from the inadequacy of the imagination and the aesthetic estimation of magnitude. You understand what Kant is saying there, right? He's saying that this is so amazing and it's almost frustrating because I can't capture what I'm seeing here. I cannot take it all in because it's doing something to me to want to know something more about myself and life. It's almost frustrating. There's this inadequacy of my imagination to be able to wrap my mind around it. And Russ Ramsey unpacks this saying of accommodation, and he says, we are pained that we cannot describe or even comprehend the wonder we're beholding. And we're aware that this is because there is something in us that is unable to behold the glory in full. It is this tension that I've experienced of seeing something. I remember driving across, I don't remember, I think it was the bridge through Tionesta, maybe it was Oil City. Many years ago, I had another business doing consulting and land and wildlife management, building food plots and reforestation projects and riparian buffers and things. And I remember it was really early in the morning. The sun was just coming up, and I was driving across this bridge with some equipment, and with me, level with my truck, was a bald eagle just over the edge of the bridge, and the sun was coming up at the same time. And for me, it's gone from being so privileged, so bestowed with grace to even experience something like that, to a deeper way of framing it, to where not only am I blessed to experience that, I'm blessed to be able to recognize the beauty and the wonder in those things. Because you can see something. How many of us have heard that phrase that you don't see the forest through the trees, or the trees through the forest for that matter? Sometimes in life, everything blends together and we miss those moments. And I'm telling you that those moments have a lasting impact on our mind, on our body, and on our soul. And eventually I'm going to get to the point where I think there's a reason for it. Because if it brings us, if beauty and wonder and the sublime just simply bring us to a point where we're indulging ourselves, and I know that sounds contradictory, but we can selfishly go after these things because now I'm telling you that there's actual benefits here. They become an idol of sorts. You say, well, I don't care about all that kind of talk. Well, that's fine, because we'll get to a point here in my discussion later on in another episode where we talk about how wonder produces gratitude in us. And there things become very sticky. And by that I mean, I think we're only left with two choices. We offer gratitude to nothing or to something. Anyways, as we continue on, wonder humbles us. It reminds us of our limits while simultaneously expanding them. See, I had mentioned, and I want to throw these out there one more time because now you're hearing me, right? I hopefully got your attention on the small self effect and the need for accommodation. We decrease anxiety. We enhance creativity. It improves our mood. We release endorphins and other neurochemicals. It boosts our immune function, my friends, and lowers our blood pressure. because all these things are happening on the inside of us. It even seen correlation with reduction in inflammation. And I'm not talking about essential oil stuff here. I'm not talking about snake charming things. I'm talking about things that, if we'd all be honest and we've been outdoors at least once, you're getting a little bit of the understanding now of what you've experienced while you were there. When we pause to experience awe, whether in nature, art, or in quiet reflection, our body and mind respond. We feel restored, renewed, and better connected to the world around us. The need for accommodation and the small self effect. These are so valuable. I hope you're hearing me. And I know you're like, well, what does this have to do with fly fishing? I think some of you are catching that drift already. But I'm going to take it a step further because, well, it's my podcast and I can. And I just want to remind you before I leave you off here with this one of a couple things. One, I would love to hear from you. You can send me an email at adam@journeyonthefly.fish. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. You can send us a message. You can disagree vehemently with me, everything I'm saying here. Or maybe wherever you're listening to this, take 60 seconds and leave an honest review so other people can find this content, because that helps us. We don't make money at this, but I enjoy getting this content out, and I want to try my best to stay consistent with it. So I'm going to remind you of good old Albert Einstein and what he told us in the last one. He who could no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe is as good as dead. His eyes are closed. Until the next time, friends, keep your lines wet in the water and tight to the fish. Remember, it's not about the destination, it's the journey that makes us. God bless.